What I have found is that if you have the face-to-face with suppliers and how it's beneficial to both companies, you get tremendous support. Because a lot of this is new and has not percolated to a majority of businesses yet, the community that is asking for features is fairly small. But the more of us that ask for new features, new connections to our suppliers, you get a synergy, a critical mass. If you've got 6 multi-billion-dollar companies asking the same supplier for a connection, you're going to get it. If you're a sub $1 billion company and you're all alone asking, you're probably going to see something in 3 months to 3 years, if ever. So the community involvement is actually very critical. We consider almost nothing of what we're working on to be proprietary or secret. We're very open on sharing it because the value of the community is more valuable than trying to hold some artificial advantage, because it tends to be supplier-driven APIs and supplier data that are at the core of this. So I have no intellectual property rights over that. I simply want a synergy among the customer base going to the suppliers to get these features out into the marketplace. When I've had conversations with other companies, typically they'll look at what we've done or a presentation or attending something like this and say, we can't do it. We're a multi-billion, multi-continent, 50-plant company. It's too complicated. Our data isn't standardized, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They've talked themselves out of it before they've even started. And I think a lot of times that, like I was saying earlier, the term digital is just too ambiguous. Everybody has a different interpretation. You can't herd the cats at the executive level and be on the same page. And then percolating down that indecisiveness, you don't go anywhere. So I would say keep it simple, use lots of elbow grease, pick an aspect of digital rather than the grand strategy. Digital supply chain, you can control within supply chain, digital, marketing and finance. But have some successes along the way before you broaden it and make it really big and complicated. So that would be my starting point, just based on some of the resistance I've seen to this.
Companies are all over the map.
Yeah.
But in my experience, I said it earlier, it's when the executive team hands it off to that internal team of experts. And Ed talked about having the Sherpa, the guide, to kind of stick with the team. I think in today's world, at least in my experience, it gets handed off and then a security thing happens and the executive team is all running into this corner of the building trying to fix something. And that SME team, the subject matter experts, they lose the vision. And then whether it's job security, they just know there are 10 steps in the process they want to make better. It gets lost then. Yep. And we need the Sherpa, the guide, to continue through with them. And what I see happening, I said it earlier, well, let's bring in one of the large consulting firms to help with this. And they just want to make sure they get the bills paid and keep the deal going. And it ends up in a bad place. I've seen it end up in some really bad, expensive places. That's my experience.
Change really brings to surface the weaknesses of the organization, hands down. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments on that, but it really does. I think somebody had mentioned when we had our pre-sessions, the pain point is just not bad enough yet. People usually don't make this amount of change and disruption unless they're feeling the pain. So I don't know, any more comments from the panelists?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is leadership, right? I mean, who's running the company and is there fear of failure override their ability to take on risk? I mean, so many CEOs, CFOs, their fear of having a negative situation turn into a financial failure is going to keep them so conservative that they don't want to change. And if you have that leadership that is open to, okay, hey, we're going to put it all on the table, we're going to transform the company and we're going to do this, then truly I think that's the thing that you need. And so many of companies in our industry have that fear of failure in their leadership, and they're just not willing to make the change. But I think that's evolving, certainly. From this discussion here, we're seeing that evolve in our industry.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think there's a push and a pull a little bit too. So you use the word finance. I think you use the word willingness. I think there's this really imbalance, if you will, which is the willingness to commit and like continue to go and to power through. I can't imagine on your first journey you got it right. I mean, 100%. It's had to evolve. And I think what I've seen is as you navigate this journey, it gets expensive. And if it doesn't start working quick enough, you get this pressure between it's not working and I'm spending money, and you really have to commit to it. You really have to understand the greater purpose and the greater vision, which is kind of a common theme. It's, okay, this is where I want to be, but I'm not going to get there starting tomorrow. It's kind of like the climbing thing. Like I need these 4 milestones, and I don't need to have that timeline. I mean, obviously you got to protect the balance sheet and you got to protect finances to a degree, but you kind of have to power through some of those difficult times. And I think that's what oftentimes happens. It sounds cool, it sounds fun. I know it could be helpful. This whole AI conversation has really respun this thing back up. But the challenge, and as we were talking about it, is when macro related, it's just people think it's just pressing a button. And it's not that simple, right? And so you have to go through this. You got to go through the pain, you got to power through it, you got to make that commitment, you got to know that it's going to cost a little bit, but when I get on the other side of it, it's a whole new world.
Yeah, again, I'm on the simplify side of things. So small business, not easy to budget for huge projects. So we kept the definition simple. I got budget approval for the first year, since that was infrastructure. From the following year, when we did our first million parts online, which was 2016 to today, I have zero budgeted this. I'm allowed to zero budget if it pays for itself in under a year. So to me, the expenses are more than manageable. The payback is significant. You're looking at taking purchasing costs from, pick a number in your industry, $25, $50, $100 a line item on a purchase order down to 25 cents. The numbers scale beautifully, so the budgeting has not been an issue on this.
Speaking of that, though, leadership, before we get into our final question, somebody had mentioned EQ, and we talk about this a lot at Women Electronics. That's what we do, is we talk about leadership quite a bit and emotional intelligence, and somebody mentioned the fear. And really, it's probably our biggest holdback in all kinds of systemic change. And we do have a demographic, again, a lot of our top leaders, thank goodness we had them during the whole pandemic. Like these people really, their expertise carried us through, and we need them moving forward. There's room for everybody in this massive channel we have, but it hasn't been a requirement before to be evolved personally, to have emotional intelligence. It just wasn't something we thought of that was a really required leadership trait. And so we do have a lot of leaders that just weren't developed, right, in that area. It wasn't a requirement, and it is now. So that is the challenge too, is we need our existing leaders. We had something come out that was very fascinating at our last Women Electronics Summit, and it was a research that was done about leaders, C-suite. And it showed, and Chris, I think you were there, the higher we rise in our leadership journey, the less coachable we become. Because success makes us feel like we just got this figured out. So many or most of our leaders are not being coached or not seeking coaching, but we need to shift that mentality to say we all are a work in progress. We all need to learn more, evolve, and grow. And I think that could be a takeaway too. Wherever you're leading in your organization, are you getting coaching? Are you growing personally? Because all of that 100% comes into the workplace and impacts your entire organization.